I was drafted into the Army as soon as I graduated from college. And after 2 years later, when I got out of the Army, I had this idea that I would go to Washington and I would get a law degree. So I went to Washington and I signed up for law school and went a half a semester. And now I did not flunk out. I always try to make that important. I did not flunk out. But when I started studying contracts, torts, and legal method, I thought, I don't want to do this. I don't want to take homework home and stay and sweat over these contract, torts, and legal methods the rest of my life. So I did various things. I taught dancing for a year for Arthur Murray. I thought, I'll go to their training class and I'll learn all these great dances, but I don't want to be a dance teacher. So it was not my idea to be a ballroom dance teacher. So halfway through the training class, though, see, Arthur Murray was smarter than I was. They came in with a contract. They said, you either have to drop out of training class right now or sign this contract to teach with us for a year after you get the rest of your training. Well, by that time I was hooked. I mean, I wanted to finish the training class, and I did, and I signed the contract and I taught for a year. I had sat on the front porch during the years of World War II, and I had listened with my father to the radio, and we had listened to Edward R. Murrow in London, and we could hear the bombs falling. And it was like a bolt of lightning that hit me that radio, there was no TV, radio was king then, and I could hear Murrow talking to us sitting on the front porch in Biscoe, and I thought what a miracle that was. And that I wondered, what kind of, that must be really exciting to sit in front of a microphone and have lots of people listening to you. And that's where I had this dream in the back of my mind that I wanted to be a broadcaster and a journalist. I first took the Washington phone book. I went to ABC first. What's your experience? We don't have anything for you. Then I went to CBS. Same thing. What's your experience? I'm sorry, I don't have any. I'm just out of the Army and blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry, we don't have anything for you. My last chance was NBC. I go over there and a man named George McKinnon interviewed me. He's an old Scotsman. And he was about to dismiss me, and he said, I have a little job that you won't be happy in. You'll give me trouble because you're way overqualified for it. You finished college, you've been in the Army. I said, well, what is it? And he said, it's for a job. I have a job opening for an NBC page. And I said, if you will let me have that job, I will not disappoint you. I'll be the best page you ever had. So that's how I got in the door at NBC. I had some marvelous experiences when Premier Nikita Khrushchev came from Russia to talk to the American people. He came to our studio, which was the network. It was owned by the network, and I was assigned to be the assistant director. So I was able to be in the same room for that historic telecast. I was introduced to Premier Khrushchev through an interpreter. I had to hold up cue cards, time cards, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 30 seconds, and on down, written in Russian. And one of the things that happened before the broadcast that scared me, the KGB were all over the station. I mean, they were everywhere, on the roof and behind the curtains and everywhere. In those days, the assistant directors had to carry a flow pen, which were huge in those days, about the size of a cigar. They actually had liquid in them, and if we needed to, and a felt tip. And if we needed to write something to hold up for somebody on the air, we could scribble it down. And so I had one in my pocket. And I reached in my pocket after the premiere got settled. I reached in my pocket and pulled this tube out. And all of a sudden I was being pushed and pummeled by the KGB people who just rushed me. They didn't knock me down, but they're knocking me back and everything. And I thought, it scared me. What in the world have I done? And they grabbed that aluminum tube, and they thought it was some kind of weapon until they pulled the top off and saw it was a flow pen. God, I thought I was going to be killed. Our lawyer at NBC called me in one day, and he said, Charlie, I want you to take this form over. It's a legal document. And he said, I want you to hand deliver it to Senator John Kennedy. Don't give it to anybody else. And hand it to him and ask him if he will read it and sign it, and then you take it from him and you bring it back to me. That was my assignment. So I go take a yellow cab down to the Senate office building and find the senator's office and walk in and introduce myself to the receptionist. You don't just walk into a senator's office, there's always somebody to stop you. And I introduced myself and told her that I had a document for him to sign, and she said, well, here, I'll give it to him, he's busy. And I said, I'm sorry, but my orders are to hand it to him personally. She said, well, you're going to have to wait for a while. And I said, okay. So I sat down, and I guess it was maybe 45 minutes later, the inner office door opened, and out walked Bobby Kennedy. And so Bobby didn't speak to me, he just looked at her and said, who is this young man? And what does he want? And she said, he has a document for the senator to sign. He's from NBC. And he said, well, here, he said, hand it to me, I'll hand it to Jack. And I said, my orders are to hand it to the senator and ask him if he will sign it, and then to take it back to the station. And he looked like, who is this upstart? I don't think he liked it, but he didn't fuss at me. He just said, all right, come on in. He said, Jack, here's a kid from NBC, something for you. And so I met both of them right there on the spot. And Senator Kennedy was very nice. He was polite. He was businesslike. He was very polite. And I handed it to him, and he looked at it. And I had read it on the way over in the cab, and what it was a document that relieved NBC from any libelous thing that John Kennedy would say during the campaign. It cleared the network of having libel suits. And so it was easy for my untrained eye to understand what it was. So he looked at it and read it quickly, and he said, okay, and he signed it and gave it back to me, and that was my meeting of John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. And I've seen Kennedy arrive at the station and get out of a yellow cab wearing his favorite, I don't know how many of them he had, but he loved the blue pinstripe suit. And he looked fantastic. I mean, he looked like a movie star. But I've watched him arrive at the station in a yellow cab, get out and walk through the lobby of the station where there would be a whole bunch of young mothers with their little kids waiting to go to the Bozo show. And he would walk through there and nobody would even notice him. And a little over a year later, that man was President of the United States. I had some marvelous experiences, and I can't discount the fact that I met the love of my life at NBC. She had worked there already for several years. The first time I saw her she was walking down the hall away from me, and she had just come back from vacation, and so she had a nice tan, and that was back when young professional women, there was a certain way to dress. And in the summertime, a lot of them wore these little gossamer, you couldn't see through them, but I mean, I'm talking the real small pleats, dresses with tiny little pleats. And a girl with a good figure, if they walked away from you could see that dress, swinging back and forth. And that's the first time I saw her. So I delivered the mail to Nancy Rankin, along with everybody else in the building. Good morning, Miss Rankin, here's your mail. And she was so beautiful. And I have a picture of exactly how she looked when I first met her. Nancy had the greatest legs in the greater Washington, D.C. area. I was teaching some classes just to make extra money. She would follow me to those classes and watch me teach. And she's so bright, she picked up right up on that. And she actually became a better teacher than I was, and I was a pretty good teacher. We met over dancing. We loved to dance with each other, and dancing has been a great part of our lives together. She was so much fun, and she was so bright, and she was so pretty, and she had a lot of guys interested in her, and I had to get rid of them kind of one at a time. But it went on, and we got married in 1960, September 3rd, and I brought her immediately to Raleigh, which she loved her boss. She loved working at NBC, but I got this job in Raleigh at WPTF as an announcer, staff announcer. So I married her and brought her down here, plopped her into a little walk-up apartment on St. Mary's Street. It's still there on the corner of Hillsborough and St. Mary's. We lived on the top floor, and it was a walk-up. I think it was 3 stories. And she was just coming from NBC in Washington and all of her friends up there and her good boss and everything, and being plopped down here in Raleigh, she was not happy about it. She was happy to be with me, though. And anyway, she had to get used to some of the things that Southerners do and say. I remember one time she came in, and she was kind of puzzled looking, and she had been shopping or something. And I said, what's wrong? What is it? And she said, well, I had a woman say the strangest thing to me on the street. And I said, well, what did she say? Nancy said, I'd run you down for that sweater. And I said, Nancy, that was the highest compliment that woman could pay you. She didn't mean she was going to do it. She just meant that sweater was so beautiful. I said it was a high compliment. Nancy wanted to learn how to cook collards because my mother cooked the greatest collards you've ever seen and ever tasted, and Nancy wanted to know how to do that, and so some older person said, well, you get some streak of lean. You season them, you wash them, you boil them, and you have a good chunk of streak of lean in there to season them. So Nancy went to the store, and she had lost the idea, she didn't lose the idea of streak-a-ling, but she couldn't think of it. So she told the butcher, I would like some striped meat. The butcher said, what? Striped meat? But Nancy adjusted and is as much of a Southerner as I am now, and I could not drag her back up there. She's just been marvelous for me for my whole career. She's loved me and unconditionally, and she's my best friend and my cheerleader, and I don't know what I would have done without her.